All right, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight to this event. And my name's Masliansky. I host a podcast called Inside the C.H.A.N.G.E, where I interview a lot of people in Skokie and Evanston. And recently I had the pleasure to interview Alison Pure-Slovan from the Simon Wiesenthal Center. And she told me about this event with TM. And I am so grateful to have the opportunity to interview TM Garret tonight. And I want to thank a few people before we start. First of all, obviously I want to thank the Simon Wiesenthal Center, which is an international Jewish human rights organization. They fight anti-Semitism, racism, and hate. And big part of their mission is to educate. So for instance, tonight is an event where we have an opportunity to speak with TM Garret, who is a former neo-Nazi who has become a peace activist, which is such an amazing story, and I can't wait to hear. I also want to thank Industrious Co-working Space for allowing us to use their space here tonight. And it's a great space to work if you want information. There's information on the table. I'm happy to help you with that as well, to tell you more about it. And I also want to thank Few Spirits. They are a liquor distillery here in Evanston. I've had them on my show, and they donated some whiskey here tonight, which is delicious, so please enjoy. And with that, I want to start talking with TM. So TM, you have an amazing story. And we're going to hear about it tonight, where you came from a background where you were a former neo-Nazi, you become a peace activist. But when we talk about that, and with the audience here tonight, I imagine that can be somewhat scary for people to hear. I don't know how many people here have met somebody who has a background like you. But I think it's a rare opportunity for us to be able to get to know your story and to be able to learn about how that happens and how everyone can make change. So thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me here. Thank you, everybody, for coming out and wanting to listen to my story.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how you grew up. Where did your life start and as a child and whatnot?
Well, born and raised in Germany. That's where the funny accent comes from. So my apologies for that. I wasn't raised in a hateful environment at all.
No?
It wasn't my parents had nothing to do with anything that was racist or anti-Semitic. But it was a dysfunctional family. So my parents came both from different parts of Germany and moved into a small town of 500 in southern Germany. The only Catholics in the town are full of Protestants. First problem. Second problem, they had an alcohol problem, drinking problem. The third problem, they divorced. So my mom was the only single mother at the time. Fourth problem, a different dialect. So everything, the strangers, the new ones, full of problems that caused a lot of problems. They were the outcast, and a lot of families even told their kids not to play with us kids.
Did you have a lot of siblings too?
I've got 3 siblings. They're older than I, 8, 11, and 13 years older. So there's more a cluster, so they could stick together more. I was unwanted. I hadn't been a divorce or during the divorce.
Oh boy.
And my mom didn't know what to do with me at all. But I had no idea that she was fighting her demons, that she was drinking. She hid it very well. And I thought something is wrong with me. And so, again, I thought something is wrong with me. And I tried to fit in. I didn't have any role models because there was no father figure. My brother, he moved out. He went to college when I was 6. My older sister moved out. She got married when I was 6, left with my mother and only my other sister, who's 13 years older. So her music influenced me. A lot of rock music, English language music, but it was a hollow message. I didn't understand it at the time. And I felt like other kids had an identity. Like one was a Boy Scout, a couple others were into church, one family was big in the army, another was into sports. I didn't have any of that.
Did you have interaction with your father?
A little bit, but he died when I was 8. So I don't remember much. And I just tried to fit in. I just tried to find myself in the world. I felt unwanted.
Yeah.
I wanted to be valued. I wanted to have a purpose and identity. And then at the age of 9, I had a meningitis infection, left the right half of my face paralyzed. So I was that weird kid with that family full of problems in these over-the-top clothes because my mother tried to get me through school and just tried to provide over-the-top good. The emotional support was missing, though.
Yeah.
And that led to an environment where I was bullied.
So you were bullied quite a bit, and how did you deal with being bullied?
I guess like any other child, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
No child likes to be bullied, and I did not know how to deal with it. It makes you feel ashamed. You feel guilty for you don't know what. It's just you think something is wrong with you. That's why you're bullied.
Yeah.
And I went through elementary school, middle school, high school, and then I got presented with something that would bring me the attention that I craved for. Happened actually in history class. We started learning about World War II, the Nazis, Third Reich, and the Holocaust. And we found out, especially in Germany at the time, the worst thing you can do is pick the Holocaust and make jokes about it.
Can you go to jail over that in Germany?
You can. There's really hard hate crime laws, but that was the late 80s. It wasn't really enforced that much because the government was not aware that it's a real problem. And the school will handle it with, it's kids, they're 13, and it will go away. And for the most kids, it went away.
Yeah.
For me, it didn't. And it was also, we made fun about Hitler too. So it was anything that had to do with the time was taboo. It was too serious. And again, the other kids went back to normal. The problem is I didn't have a normal to go back to. So I kept running with those jokes longer until I got labeled as a Nazi. And the thing is,
they became not jokes at that point.
Right. So, but I didn't know what Nazis were. I mean, we learned it. The war was over in 1945, and the Nazis were actually gone.
Right.
And I was like, I can't be a Nazi. I'm making fun of Hitler too. So how does this work? Nobody took the time to sit down with me and talk about it. It was just a label. Okay, you're a Nazi. And I didn't understand it first. But it had a side effect that I did like. All of a sudden, I was somebody. I had an identity.
Were people scared of you?
Yes, definitely. First I thought it's respect, but I think it was more likely fear.
Yeah.
But I had all the attention that I wanted. And everybody wanted to see, okay, that's the kid with the Nazi jokes. Well, all the other kids went back to the normal. So we want to see what's going on. Until another kid at a school gave me a cassette tape with far-right extremist music. They were also singing about all this stuff about they're proud to be Germans and people call them Nazis, but they're not. I was like, hold on, that's exactly how I feel. First time somebody understands me, not even without knowing me. Wow, and it was like rock music, just like my sister's music, the only thing that ever influenced me, and I was hooked. The problem was with every cassette tape I got from the time on, the music got more hateful, more radical, and radicalized me. So all of a sudden it was skinhead music, and I was looking for groups of skinheads. I wanted to join them.
Were you writing music like that too?
Later, yes.
Yeah.
But that was at the age of 15, so I joined a group of skinheads. And first it was only about the subculture and using all these Nazi symbols and everything to provoke. It was not really an ideological background at that time. That came a little bit later, 2 years later, when I joined a far-right neo-Nazi party. And then when it became an ideology.
How old were you when you joined that?
17.
Wow. And nobody ever came up to you and said, hey, this is, wrong, or,
Oh, yes. People came out and said, this is wrong. But let's say if you're married and your wife tells you all the time you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're most likely to shut down and become defensive, right?
Of course, yes.
You're not changing your mind if she's not wanting to listen what's going on. Why do you do what you do? Right. And this is exactly what happened. So nobody really sat down and listened. Okay, what's going on in your life? It was just, oh, that's wrong, you're wrong. And it's so bad. Nazis are bad and immigrants are good. And that was the only message.
Yeah.
But nobody wanted to listen.
Did you ever have like a school social worker or somebody ever talk to you?
No, looking back, there was one teacher who was actually really concerned, and it was my English teacher, and he also was the religion teacher, and he came back. It's funny, actually, from Israel every year with the slides, and back then it was the most boring part of school because he showed his Israel slides, and I didn't like it back then. But now, looking back, I realized how much he meant to me, and he tried to reach out a couple of times. I just didn't see it at the time. So I actually reached out to the teacher a couple of years ago and thanked him and told him about that. He really appreciated that.
You never
And
know.
I wish I would have appreciated his Israel efforts more, but that was contrary to what I was talking about at that time.
Right, at that point in your life.
Yeah.
But when you start talking about the hate, I mean, did you hate all different groups of people? I mean, was it just Jews, or was it just anybody who was
different?
Aryan?
Everybody who was actually not German,
Yeah.
or who was everybody who was not straight, everybody who was disabled, everybody with a different ethnicity, everybody with a different belief system.
Did you ever act on that violently?
Well, we had at the time when I joined the skinheads, there were some like street fights with a couple other gangs.
Yeah.
But later, when it became more ideological, I decided it's the wrong way because several reasons. I didn't want to go to prison. I wouldn't be good for the cause in prison, and I was convinced we can't reach our goals with violence.
Right. And so you're 17 when you started in this, and then I imagine as you got older, you got more ingrained in it. You talk about how you started to write music in it. How did things develop as you got older with that?
Well, I was about the age of 19. I was so deep into that ideologically that I started writing music and lyrics about that, and started making music as a neo-Nazi singer and songwriter. You know, and I liked all the music that my sister listened to, and I wanted to play the guitar when I was a kid. Nobody would let me because my mom just didn't get it. She was so busy fighting her demons, drinking and everything. And all of a sudden, I had an audience. I had people listening. Somebody wanted to listen. I felt valued. It felt great at the time.
You had the attention
all of a sudden I was somebody, and I could be on the stage, and people were listening to my message and to my music. And
so then,
it felt right at the time.
As you got into that, though, I mean, were you a leader in the groups, or did you start?
Not yet.
Yeah.
But starting writing music, people would start looking up to you, which felt great too, of course. You feel even more valuable. You're somebody.
Yeah.
And then I started a series of Nazi skinhead bands and toured over Europe. And so I was climbing up the ladders in that movement. And I would say late 90s, when a lot of internet websites popped up and chat rooms, that gave me all of a sudden the opportunity to two things. Number one, to get in touch with other right-wing extremists and Nazis worldwide in chat rooms, and also access to banned literature. Again, Germany has really, really good and hard hate crime laws and hate speech laws. So therefore, a lot of that literature is forbidden and banned. You can't go just buy it. But all of a sudden, that was there online, and with one mouse click, you could download it. All the stuff that you didn't know before. And those people I was talking to, all of a sudden, from other countries like the USA, Canada, Argentina, Great Britain, Australia, everywhere, it looked like, oh, they're all like-minded, and they have the same problem with immigrants and with black people and with their government. And why is that? And they told me, well, we've got an explanation. You need to download a certain book.
Which book was that?
The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. And which I know now, which is a propaganda piece made in Russia in 1903 by Russian anti-Zionists to discredit Jews and stir hate. But a lot of people picked it up even back then. Henry Ford spread it in the USA really widely. And those people told me, read it. It's the blueprint, and it explains who the real enemy is. It's not just the government. It's not just the immigrants. It's not the black people. They're all just like, they're just being used. And the real enemy is the Jew. They want to take over the world. That's the ones promoting race mixing to create that unstable race they can control better, to dumb them down. They control the media. Just look at Hollywood. All the Hollywood actors and everything is Jewish, and they control the banks and the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. And that was the only thing I was reading. And those people convinced me that there's this supervillain we have to fight to, you know? And I felt like a knight who's just defending your people.
Yeah.
And we thought it's the right thing to do. And I felt like I found the Holy Grail. Like that
You
was
felt
the
like you were
solution.
doing something right.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was like, again, a superhero fighting a supervillain. Which kid doesn't want to do that?
Oh my God. So then you started to really get into it. You started reading the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Where did that lead you to next?
Well, to the conclusion that there's that overpowerful enemy that is behind everything. So this is what we have to fight. And all of a sudden, it made sense. Oh, that's why Hitler hated the Jews. Ah, okay. And then I got into other literature too. I became a Holocaust denier. As a teenager, when I made those jokes, I didn't doubt that it happened. Otherwise, the jokes wouldn't have worked. And I recognized the Nazis were the bad guys. I remember one teacher asking me, "Why are you a Nazi? Don't you know they're bad?" I said, "Yeah, that's kind of the point. Otherwise, I couldn't be the bad kid." Later, that turned around. Like, no, the Nazis were the good guys, and the Holocaust never happened, and the Jews just invented that to press money out of the white race and to get Israel, and makes it easier to take over the world. And this is how that changed. And for a couple of years, I became actually a full-blown anti-Semite at the time.
Did you start to admire Hitler at that point, even though you didn't at first?
At first, yes. At the time, because I felt like, oh, he got it. This is why they did it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, just getting rid of the Jews but not murdering them, because we still wanted to look like the good guys. So the good guys can't kill 6 million people.
My God.
So this is how those people tick, you know, finding an explanation or excuse and pulling things out of context. And we'll get to that in a minute with my next step, what I did then.
Yeah.
Because it happened there too.
Well, your next step, I mean, as you got bigger, you started to incorporate other groups into Germany, right? Or was that
Yes
a
and
step
no.
after?
That was about a year later. I got introduced to somebody. Actually, it was a group of people that followed me around when I was playing gigs. And I knew one of them at least was a Klansman. He was a member of the KKK in Germany. I knew early 90s, he flew actually here to Chicago and came back as a Klansman with another guy. And that was like an open secret, but nobody thought they'd do anything. They came back with a membership and that's it. And they followed me around, and I realized that's a cluster of Klansmen. It's a Klan group. I had no idea that a Klan really existed in Germany. Later I learned they existed since 1920. So a German-American pastor brought it to Germany. And the ironic part is Hitler banned the Klan.
Really? Why did he ban the Klan?
Because it's a secret society.
Yeah.
So he banned the Freemasons, secret society, so he also banned the Klan. And died again, then GIs brought it back in the 60s, died again, and then the skinheads brought it back in the 1980s. And that was one of the groups, so 4 or 5 active Klan groups at that time in Germany. One of them followed me around, and one time at a barbecue, one of the guys asked me if I want to join the Klan. And I hadn't even thought about that, because I thought, okay, they're super exclusive and you have to apply and prove that you're Aryan or whatever. And he's just asking me, and that felt good. So exclusive and valuable, they want me. I don't have to ask them.
You were being recruited.
Right.
Yeah.
So I joined them. And one of the problems I had there, it was a new ideology. The Klan claims to be Christian. And you have to understand what kind of dilemma I had. The German far right, or the German Nazis and racists, they tick a little bit different from the American Nazis.
How so?
American racists justify their hatred very often with the Bible. Germans don't do that. The reason is, and the former friend I had back then, he said something very interesting. Christianity is Judaism for non-Jews.
Interesting.
Let it sink in a second, you'll think, that's right. That's exactly what it is. And back then it made sense too, but it also meant, okay, you cannot be an anti-Semite and a Christian at the same time. Doesn't work. And I thought, hold on, but the Klan claims to be Christian, and what about the guy on the cross?
Right.
Wasn't he Jewish? You can turn it upside down, whatever. He was Jewish. And so I had questions. How does this work? And racism in the Bible? Like German Nazis usually say, Christianity is like a weak religion begging on the knees versus the Nordic religion with the strong Vikings. I said, so that doesn't. It just doesn't make any sense. No, it's there in the Bible. I said, where? I said, yeah, you have to ask these and these people. I don't know exactly. So it took a while to find the right people who pointed out. And there was a lot of things that didn't make sense. Even at that time, I didn't buy it.
Where it wasn't actually in the Bible, but they were trying
No,
to
there's a
make
couple
excuses.
of quotes that you could lead to the conclusion.
Yeah.
But I had so many doubts. At that time, I rose up the ladder again and became the leader of a European Klan group.
What was your title?
The European White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And I didn't want to teach my members something that I'm not 100% convinced in. That I know that it's the right deal. So I thought, okay, what about those famous translation errors? You have 20,000 Bible translations. Every Bible translation says something different. And especially when it comes to the Old Testament, Hebrew. No vowels. And there's a lot of room for interpretation, and some of the words mean 10 different things, depending on the context too.
Sure.
So I thought, there's probably translation errors there. Let's find them. And again, the internet gave me a lot of tools to find them. There were translation tools that you could click on Bible links and translate from Hebrew to English, from Greek to English, like the New Testament. And of course, I picked the translation that fit me best, and that was proving my agenda. So I did exactly the same thing. I pulled it out of context and used the wrong translation at the time just to justify my hatred. I did exactly the same thing.
And when you justified your hatred like that, you were able to then educate the other members of the group.
I tried to, but that didn't work well. It turned out as an ideology here in the US, it's called Christian identity, that believes in the theory that white people in Europe are the descendants of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. They didn't disappear. They came over the Caucasian mountains into Europe. That's why Caucasian, makes sense, right? And that 2 tribes of the kingdom of Judah, they went into Babylonian exile, and the new rulers put strangers there, so they got mixed up. They lost their bloodline to God. Well, the 10 tribes didn't. So therefore, the 10 tribes, white people, are the chosen people, and the Jews are not anymore, because they got mixed up. They lost the bloodline to God. Oh, makes perfect sense to me at that time. And I tried to teach that to my members. But again, the German racist Nazis take differently. I had a very hard time to sell that idea. It didn't really work out. So that clashed. It clashed really, really bad. And due to the fact that the German authorities, again, they have very strict hate crime laws, they put the finger on that and tried to work against it really good, which means they knocked at my door often with search warrants, confiscating computers, just checking if we do something wrong, whatever.
They ever arrest you?
No, I ran into problems with the law. I didn't get arrested.
Yeah.
But they tried, of course, to convict me for things. But we were careful enough, for the most part, to go around the laws. Either use different other words, or just didn't say what we thought, or just
try to be careful.
Just try to be careful. We even had lawyers and sent lyrics to the lawyers and said, please look over it if there's anything illegal. And we would use words that everybody knows what we mean, but we just didn't say it. And the lawyers would then tell us if it's okay or not, so we wouldn't get in trouble with the law.
Did you sell a lot of records for what you wrote?
Yes, tens of thousands worldwide.
And were you on the radio with this too at that time?
Not the mainstream radio. There were like podcasts and radio stations in the far right back then already online. I ran one of those in Germany, and it was played there. And there was a black market that sold it, and there was a lot of people buying that stuff, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And it's still out there.
And
even some of my stuff is still out there, and there's nothing I can do because it's a black market.
Right.
Try to sue those people.
but it's a black market, so there's no way to get it
exactly.
back.
And it makes me a target too. So
It's dicey.
It's yeah. So being in that clan group and again trying to sell that idea that clashed, and also I had a lot of doubts. Again, otherwise I wouldn't have dug into those translations. And all people in groups like that have doubts. Somebody who's in for a year, somebody who's in for 50 years. Even if they look so radical that you would think they don't. But everybody does. The problem is you don't talk to anybody about your doubts. Because you live in your bubble.
Do you ever actually, in all this time, did you ever meet a Jew? Or did you meet other people in these groups that you hated?
Well, being in Germany, there's not a lot of Jews,
Right.
unfortunately. So I never had the opportunity. And at some point, I didn't even want to. Black people, at the time, were not many either. And there were a lot of Turkish Muslims, and that was the main enemy for some time. But for that reason, there were a lot of Turkish street gangs. When we were skinheads, the street gangs, of course, it clashed.
Sure.
And we just projected their behavior on everybody. Well, of course, their parents were not like that. The grandparents were not like that. They were just nice people. But we didn't want to see that. We didn't see it. We didn't socialize with them.
Yeah.
We saw them as the enemy. They want to infiltrate this country. They want to invade it. They want to take over.
Yeah.
So
So what actually happened then? So you said you had doubts. When did you start to change? When did you realize that this wasn't for you?
the first thing I did is when the police knocked at the door again, like the 100th time, and told me that they're watching us, and I felt so secure. Nothing can happen to me. We're careful. But they made me aware of the fact that if one of my members commits a violent crime, that is still my head on the plate. And the thing is, I never wanted to go to prison. So out of fear, paired with that infighting and all these doubts and all of that, I retired. I thought I have to get away from that situation, at least
Is
for
that
now.
common for people to retire?
Yeah, it's just not go there anymore. Just say, oh, that's too hot right now. I can't do that. So I picked up the phone. I should have disbanded the group, but I thought it's the right thing just to retire and appoint a successor. That's what I did. Appointed a successor. I told him, I'm not coming back. Next year, you vote a new leader. They really vote. And that's it. The problem was I was so stuck in my bubble, in that really tight bubble, that I lost any relationship to the outside world. So when I retired, in my head, I was still a racist. I was still an anti-Semite. I was not that much of a Nazi anymore. I made differences there because I wanted to infiltrate society. And I knew with National Socialism, especially in Germany, it doesn't work anymore. Period. Germany does a great job atoning, reflecting on the Holocaust in the past and making up for it, make sure that this is never happening again. So I knew that won't work. But since I had nothing else, I was still hanging around with them sometimes, drinking a beer, playing darts or whatever. But after a couple of months, I was aware I have to get away from them to get out of the influence.
Yeah.
Out of the influence. And we decided to move 100 miles away. The thing was, I made all my money in that movement. Like, that happens. You create a parallel society where you have your own company, you serve that movement, you sell
That's
your
your
stuff
market.
to the... Yeah, that's my market.
Yeah.
Well, losing that, all of a sudden, we were on Section 8.
Yeah.
A family full of trouble, coming from the background, on Section 8, 2 weeks before Christmas, trying to find an apartment.
Was it
Good
just
luck.
you?
It was me, my back then wife, and the 3 kids.
Okay.
So I had 3 kids that were born at the time. And we found an apartment. We looked, it was a classified. We called it, and I heard the accent, Turkish immigrant. And I was like, oh boy. No, that was one of my enemies. I didn't want to move in. I looked at my then wife and said, you want to do that? But we had no choice.
Needed a place to live.
It was the only one we could find, so we moved in. Completely broke, we had nothing. And one of my business was computer related, so the landlord, he lived downstairs in his apartment. We had the apartment upstairs. And he offered me work because his computer kept breaking. And he offered me to repair it and would pay me. I didn't feel really comfortable with that either. I didn't want to go in this apartment. I didn't want to take his money, but I had to. I was desperate. And that went on for a couple of months. At that time, almost founded another KKK group because, again, I was stuck in that for 17 years. It was all I had.
Right.
But I was hesitating. I didn't know what it was yet until one certain moment that really broke the ice, almost broke the hate. I was invited for dinner, and it was, if you talk about the kind of culture, you hear that they're very offended if you reject their offer of food or something.
Sure.
Yeah? And he invited me for dinner. And usually I would not have said yes. But after the 6 months, I felt more comfortable. And I was downstairs and was just me with his family and very uncomfortable first. And started serving. And the appetizer was fish soup. That was my reaction. I was like, oh, man. I was like, what am I gonna do? I heard they're super offended if I tell them I don't want that. Will he murder me in my bed? After all, that was the people that I thought that are invading the country and taking over.
Right.
They wanted to get rid of the Germans. Of course he will murder me in my bed, Or, I don't know, grow fangs or blow me up, kick me out of his house, it's his. And I didn't want to find out. But I had to. I had to find out how offended he would be.
Because you couldn't eat that soup.
Yeah, my thing was, I thought he's acting like the nice guy, but actually he's a Muslim terrorist. And I wanted to rip off his mask off his face. And I thought, okay, this is the time when I will find out. And I told him, Himmet, I do not like fish soup. And guess what happened?
What happened?
Nothing. His wife came, took the fish soup, brought the rest of the food and everything. It was fine. And I was sitting there so puzzled. I was like thrown off my track,
Yeah.
He actually pulled off my mask. I was the bad guy at the table, not him. He was the nice guy, and he was still a nice guy.
Did you feel like you had an epiphany at that point?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I kind of knew it all along, but that was just the moment. And it felt like all that hatred was laying in front of me in crumbs. And I had two options. Either I go and take those crumbs and put them together, back together to the loaf of hate that I used to nurture, or I analyze them.
Yeah.
Well, let's analyze them. And Germany has a great population of Turkish Muslims. So let's go out there and find out. See the exception, still good in hiding, or I don't know, pretending. The other ones are probably terrorists, I thought,
You still had that thought. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And I needed to find out. And I realized over the years that he was not the exception.
Did he know what your background was like?
At some point, yes. Not when he took us in, but later, yes. We never talked about it. It didn't matter. Because he just showed me something that I thought I didn't deserve. That was compassion. I wasn't ready to give that compassion to him, but he was ready to give it to me.
Mm-hmm.
Compassion, respect, unconditional love, no matter of the background.
You never had that, did you? Up until that point?
No. Not as a child, because my mom was busy fighting her demons.
Yeah.
Not in school, I was bullied. Then I felt like compassion in the far-right movement, but that was just valuing me there. Then for society, I felt there was no compassion from society. Honestly, if you walk out of your office on Monday and walk out there and there's a guy standing down there with swastika tattooed on his neck, do you want to talk to him?
It scared the hell out of me.
So, no, right?
Right, of course.
So, and this is it. He may be gone out of the white supremacist movement for 20 years, and you just don't know, but you're scared.
Right.
There's a lot of judgment, of course.
Well, you're scared of what you don't know.
Right, exactly. So, and we knew that. Who are you going to talk to? This is what I did for 10 years after I left the hate groups. I talked to only a couple people about my past, and even I had a long-term relationship, and I only told her I used to be a far-right skinhead. That's it. No details, not that I was a leader, because fear of rejection, judgment, that people turn their backs on me and walk away.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a problem.
So what did you do from there? I mean, you're here in America now. There's obviously a lot more to that story. But when did you start to try to turn it around and become an activist?
So I moved to the US 10 years later in 2012. And first I thought, I'm entering the multicultural melting pot that's promoted, that you see in Hollywood movies, black cop, white cop, best friends, go to each other's houses, hang out. And then I moved to Memphis, Tennessee.
Of all places. Yeah.
And it doesn't exist. It's like the chosen segregation. That's how it felt. And I was puzzled again. I didn't understand. So after a while, it became a little bit my mission to find out why that is. And get in touch with the Black community. And just find out. And it had to do, I still didn't talk to anybody in the US about my past for the same reason. Because I had a lot of rejection in Germany when it came out. I was outed very brutally. I was not in control of that outing. And that happened in the USA too in 2015. A big newspaper had a story because they thought they had a scandal on their hands. Didn't work out for them. But I was scared when that article came out because fear of rejection.
Were you scared of the people from the groups that you were a part of?
No, I was afraid of the society of the rejection.
Yeah.
That who wants to deal with me when they find out that I used to be a KKK leader? They know me as the nice guy, and all of a sudden, what? Turn their backs on you and walk
throw
away.
You for a 180.
And that was scary as hell. I didn't want that. But I was outed. I was not in control. But it was actually good. I found out that this is not the case, especially here. America loves redemption. Germany does not, especially when it comes to Nazis. There's a good reason for that.
Sure.
They're way more sensitive. And I realized that redemption is here. And a lot of people started reaching out to me. And so I started a nonprofit organization trying to bring the Black and the white community together, especially in Memphis, with a lot of projects. And then a lot of other people who wanted to leave extremist environments, especially hate groups, reached out to me because I was out there in the public. So I started talking to them. So at the time, I already made my peace with the Muslim community that I once hated and with the Black community that I once hated, but not with the Jewish community. The thing is, I knew a couple Jews, but we never talked about being Jewish, not being Jewish. My background was just like business, or that's it. And I think there was also fear, because that was the biggest hate I had.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, if I tell a Jew that I used to be a Holocaust denier and an anti-Semite, they will turn their back on me for sure, because of the Holocaust. And I would have understood, and I was sure it will happen. And I remember 2018, I was on a trip in LA. Somebody told me to go to the Museum of Tolerance, run by the Simon Wiesenthal Center. And that other person who invited me knew the senior researcher there, Rick Eaton. And we got a VIP tour, and just the two of us with Rick, and went through the different exhibits. And especially the Holocaust exhibit. Once I got out there, I was like, wow. I just realized, because I never went to a concentration camp. Back in the bad times, I didn't want to, because I thought, I don't want to see a lie. That's not what I believed. Later, I knew it was not a lie. The Holocaust happened. But I thought, I don't need to go there, because now I know it happened. And then I went through that exhibit. The first time seeing all that stuff there, really. And I said, I need to work with the Jewish community. I haven't reflected on my past as a former anti-Semite enough, or at all.
Yeah.
That's when I started working with the Jewish community. And that was also a turning point. I started working with the Simon Wiesenthal Center. We started educating, especially college campuses, and go out and speak about it.
Have you ever
That was
felt
also a
rejection?
huge process for me.
Yeah. Have you ever felt the rejection that you were fearful of?
Of all the people and all the minorities that I used to hate and that I met, of all these communities, maybe once, twice, of thousands of people I have talked to. And the most forgiving and people that have been the best to me and the most forgiving were the Jews.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I guess it's just the nature. I don't know. But
That's interesting.
It's very interesting.
Yeah. And, part of the Simon Wiesenthal Center's mission is to educate. And by going around and like what we're doing right now and talking about your experience. But how do you've started other groups and you're trying to educate other people who are currently in hate groups. What do you do, what do you do to help them and also the people who've come out?
So there are different methods and tactics what we can do.
Yeah.
Of course, you could contact people who are in hate groups, sit down with them and talk and show them compassion and respect, and they will open up. But that can be dangerous, so I don't recommend to everybody to do that.
Right.
Fortunately, there's many formers like me out there today working in this environment, working either with the Simon Wiesenthal Center or independently or with other groups, and that's known in the movement. So that helping hand that I didn't have when I had trouble getting out, that is there today. And that is known in the white supremacist and neo-Nazi movement. So people know they can go online and type in how to get out, and they will find one of those organizations or me or the Simon Wiesenthal Center, and they can reach out. That makes it much easier. Because at some point people have those doubts. And finally they think, oh, now I can talk to somebody outside of the bubble, and they will understand because they used to be in the bubble.
There's even other social media sites that are basically made for this, right?
Right, correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And another one is also a lot of being proactive, going to college campuses. Very often I'm asked, aren't you preaching to the choir? You talk to the black community, to the Jewish community. I say, actually, yes and no. But let's say if there's an incident, let's say at a synagogue or Chabad house or whatever it is, like a swastika. And this is often when they call me and want me to speak to them. So there's different things we can do. And I know, and I dealt with the black community when churches were burning. The church was burning just 2 years ago in Louisiana. People don't hear about that. So I talked to them. And people feel helpless. Jewish community after Pittsburgh, after Poway. And people feel helpless because you don't know what to do. And my message is then, don't feel helpless. Actually, the community, every community, or we all together as a community, have a great power because we can talk to these kids. If somebody puts a swastika outside of the synagogue, you don't know if that was an active KKK group or a 16-year-old or somebody who just saw a meme on Twitter or Instagram just yesterday, or he heard it from Uncle Baba or whatever. You don't know.
Yeah.
And it happens at schools too. What do you do? You want to expel those kids from society, right? Or the person who did it. The thing is, even though it's right and needed that there's legal punishment, that's absolutely needed. Whoever did it needs to know this is a no-go. You can't do it. It needs to be punished. If you follow up too much with a social punishment afterwards and put them in the box, again, you may have seen the swastika the first time in history class or has never heard of the Holocaust. All of a sudden, they did something, triggered it, put it on there. It doesn't make it better. That's not an excuse, just an explanation. But what happened to me was I was put in the box, Nazi. I didn't feel like one.
Yeah.
So the reasons why I told Holocaust jokes was not because I felt like an anti-Semite. So it was unintentional anti-Semitism. It was still anti-Semitism, but unintentional at the time. My intention, why I told them, was a different one.
Right.
And for the person we don't know, the person who puts a swastika there, what the intention was. If we write Nazi on that box and put them in there, there's two options what we can do. You and me can pull them out of that box and save that soul, or leave them in there, and the guys with the swastikas are pulling them out. What I would want to do.
Want to get them, educate them to get them out of doing that.
But the problem is, who wants to talk to somebody who looks like a Nazi? And that's a situation. You go out there and you see somebody with a swastika. It scares you for a good reason. And this is really, that's the hard part where we have to overcome that fear and also judgment. See, hey, we have to look behind that facade and realize there's a human being, and that human being had a valid reason why they put that swastika there. Not valid to you, not valid to me. But whatever their intention was, it felt real to them and valid. Real like a child thinks the monster under the bed is real. It's exactly the same thing. As a parent, you know it isn't.
So where are some of the places that your organizations, that you're working to spread your message, and where can people find you online to be able to follow what you're doing?
Online, either through the Simon Wiesenthal Center, wiesenthal.com. There's hate incidents that they have apps for that you can download. And you can find me on my website, tmgarret.com. You can find me on social media, the handle tmgarret, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can reach out. I work with other organizations like Parents for Peace, which is a network of parents who lost their children to radical groups.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, you are doing some great work, and it's amazing. It's amazing what humanity is like, where we can come from the depths and change, and make great change, and be you stand up now.
But I wouldn't sit here without the compassion that I received from all these communities, and especially the Jewish community.
Right. Well, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you everybody here for being here and listening tonight. And just please continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.